Broken, Chapter 3, Butterflies. The hospital stay was seriously terrible. Terrible food, and always having a nurse by your side, even if you were able to do things on your own. Although I had stayed there for 4 weeks total, it felt like I had been there half a year, if not more. I walked back into my apartment to find everything rearranged, and my parents trailing in after me. We cleaned everything up a little bit, Lena. It was terribly unorganized, my mother replied, seeing my shocked look. I realized my mouth had been gaping open. Yeah, I noticed, I trailed off. I couldn't be mad at my parents because they were staying here while I was admitted. But at the same time, I was upset because I liked how things were. Everything had its place, and I knew exactly where it was. Call me dramatic, but I really hate when things aren't where I left it. It reminded me too much of when I was back in Telluride, and Curtis had taken something especially important from me. Now seeing anything out of place gives me major anxiety. My father placed the bags on the floor and walked in. Shall I order dinner for us? He asked. My stomach began to rumble. Yes, please, I replied happily. Food was the easiest thing to get over this whole rearranging ordeal, and right now, that's exactly what I needed. My mother waved her hand disgustedly. No deep dish pizza. I can't handle all of that right now. My father sighed. Nancy, it's whatever Lena wants. And if she wants deep dish pizza, he trailed off. My mother scoffed. Bert, I really could care less what she wants. She has just gotten out of the hospital, and I think she would be better off without all of those calories anyways. I huffed in disappointment. I would like, not deep dish pizza. My thoughts exactly, Lena. My mother cut me off. Nancy, my father replied in a warning tone. My mother seemed offended that he would speak to her in such a tone. There is nothing wrong with wanting to watch calories, Bert. She has been through so much, and I think it would do her good. Don't you, Lena? She said, turning to me. It seemed to me like she was going to continue with this debate, and I wasn't going to hear the end of it. Did I want pasta or deep dish pizza right now? Yes, but I was tired and didn't want to fight with my mother now. It's fine, Dad. Whatever you think is best. Chinese? I asked. He smirked. Sure. I will call the place downtown. I will be right back. He turned away and headed into the other room to call. My mother planted herself on the sofa and stared around at my bachelor pad. It was a small place with open concept, so everything was open except for the bathroom and my bedroom, which had French doors. She seemed to be thinking because she had her concentration face on. My mother was always a fanatic for the overdramatics and always had opinion about almost everything. I wouldn't say she was classed as a let me speak to your manager type, but she was almost close. And boy, did she hate when things didn't go her way. I decided her silence was almost deafening. What's wrong, Mom? I asked. She looked up at me. Oh, nothing. My eyebrow instinctively rose. Mom? Well, you see, your place is just really small, and with everything that has happened, I was thinking you could move back home to Telluride. She responded. What? Why would you think that? I exclaimed. After everything that happened to you with Curtis, you don't want to come home? You could live with us for a little until you got your own place. Your father and I wouldn't mind. I shook my head. I still have the trial, and my life is here now. It has only been 3 months, but I really feel a connection to this place. I like living here in Brooklyn, Mom. She shrugged. Maybe after the trial, we can talk about it some more, okay? although I missed the mountains in my hometown, the stream that was nearby, and the folks living there. It wasn't enough. I liked my bachelor pad and my job at Chuck's Mechanics. I was starting to develop friends like Jacob, who works at the mechanic shop. How could I give that up? My father returned and placed his phone on the coffee table. It is ordered and should be on the way soon. Have you unpacked? He asked. I looked over at my bed that had been neatly fixed. They had been sleeping in my bed since they came here, and if I unpacked, where would they sleep? No, not yet. Are you going to be staying here? My father shook his head. No, you don't really have much room here as it is, Lena. Your mother and I will get a hotel after we eat. I must get back to work and tell your ride now that you are better. My mother agreed. Yes, I have a few houses I need to sell. There's a few on Berry Street and the Brown Avenue. I want to get them ready for viewings as soon as possible to start selling. I knew that they had to head back to Telluride, but I didn't think it would be this soon. As much as they spent time with me in the hospital, I never really got to spend time with them. The anxiousness of being by myself in my apartment was starting to loom over me with each passing minute. The Chinese food arrived a little later, and we ate in silence for a little while. I always hated when people did that. They didn't know how to act or think because of something traumatic, so they don't say anything. So, Dean came to see me in the hospital to talk about the trial, I said, trying to bring up a conversation. My father, being a lawyer, perked up in interest. Oh, and what did he say? He told me I would need to testify as I am a key witness, I explained. My father nodded slightly in agreement as he understood how court was. My mother, on the other hand, flew off the handle. What? How could they ask you to do such a thing? I can understand you know what happened to you in the mechanic shop, but you already gave your statement to the police once you were released from the hospital, as did Mr. Jameson. I could understand her need to protect me, and I didn't really want to do it either, but Dean did promise me that I was going to be fine. I need to do this, Mom. I need to face him, I reassured him. My mother's face retorted, You most certainly do not. You didn't have to see you be in the hospital for 3 weeks in a coma. You didn't have to have the doctor tell you what kind of small surgery had to be done to fix your stomach. You didn't have to listen to Officer Jameson tell us about what happened to you in details. You have already been through so much, and to face that lunatic again? My mother shook her head in disbelief. My father, although understanding of the situation being serious, he did understand where my mother was coming from. He placed his hand on her shoulder and gave her a small, knowing look. I could tell almost losing their daughter was hard on them both, just as it was hard on me. I need to. I was a key witness, Dean says. I stopped. Officer Jameson says that I can put him away for a long time if I testify. That is true. You can. What else did he say? My father asked, trying to get all the information he could. He said that I need to provide proof of Curtis abusing me in the past, threats if possible, and the phone call that me and Mom had. My father stops and turns to my mother. Phone call? He asked. My mother starts to fidget with her Chinese food, avoiding eye contact with my father. She nodded slightly. Yes, I called Lena. My father raised a brow at both my mother and me. Why would a phone call between you two be used as evidence in court? He asked. It was then I realized that my father had no clue about my mother calling me to warn me that Curtis had been looking for me. She also told me in the call it had been a week back and that she answered the phone. It had nothing to do with my father at the time. so he never knew. Mom called me too. My mother cut me off and gave me a small, stern look. She knew she was about to get in trouble for not telling him. It is nothing, Bert. We should probably head to the hotel now, don't you think? I need to know everything if I am going to help Lena in court, Nancy. What are you hiding from me? Why did you call her, and why is it being used in court? He said sternly. He wasn't taking no for an answer. She sighed, defeated. I called Lena to tell her that Curtis had called a week prior and was asking around for her new address, where she was, etc. You what? He exclaimed. I looked just as shocked as my mother from his reaction. So she didn't tell him about our conversation. Why was that such a big deal? You kept that from her, and you single-handedly caused this entire situation. Do you realize that? She gasped, shocked. What do you mean I caused this situation, Bert? I wasn't the one who stabbed her. That idiot psychopath did. He shook his head in disappointment and disbelief. You knew for a week that he had been looking for her. If you had any idea that he was, you should have called her immediately and contacted the police. If you had done that, she could have been in protective custody and it never would have happened at all. Our daughter would have never gotten hurt and would not be traumatized the way she is. That week that you spent keeping it to yourself was a week he spent looking for her and eventually found her. My father began yelling toward the end. Dad, I started. He put his hand up towards me to stop me. No, Lena, this is your mother's fault. I cannot believe she had done this, Lena. I swear if I had known. I glanced at my mother, who looked absolutely devastated and now crying. I was about to tell her I didn't blame her when she stood up abruptly and headed for the door. Good night, Lena. I'm heading back to the hotel, and since we have to get back to work and Telluride, I don't know if I will see you tomorrow, she responded, barely giving me a second glance. I looked at my father, who seemed even more furious that she was going to leave the conversation like this. He stood up and headed for the door. I am so sorry, Caroline, he said to me, his voice breaking. I nodded. It's okay. Don't be too mad at Mom. She did let me know. Yes, she did. A week late. You could have been protected all this time. Will you tell her I don't blame her? She now thinks I'm against her and thinks everything that has happened these past few weeks is her fault, and I don't think that. I knew he wanted to say no, but instead he exhaled and relaxed. Yes, I will tell her. I don't think what she did was right, and trust me, she will hear about it from me later, but I will tell her. We said our goodbyes, and just like that, I was on my own again. I picked up the plates and the leftover Chinese and put them in the fridge. After a few hours of sitting around my apartment, I forgot that I would need to start working at Chuck's again. I decided to text Jacob, my colleague and friend, about working again. Hey Jacob, am I starting work again tomorrow? A text came in quicker than I thought it would, but Jacob was always on his phone from what I can see at work. It always made me laugh because he could get away with anything. Hey, I am glad to hear you are feeling okay. But are you sure you're going back to work is such a good idea? My stitches were out and all I had was a bandage, and the more I sat at home thinking about Curtis and the trial, the more I would go crazy. Work was a better option. Yeah, doctor gave me the all clear. I can be in tomorrow. Can you let Chuck know for me? I needed my normal. I also needed someone to talk to Jacob about everything. Since I moved to Brooklyn and started working at Chuck's, it had become my second home. Jacob and I got close and would get lunch together almost every day. Sure, I will text him tonight. See you tomorrow. I smiled at my phone and let out a sigh of relief. Finally, maybe I can get my life back the way it used to be before Curtis. No more looking over my shoulder to see if I am being followed or being scared every time I go home. Curtis was in jail, and I was going to testify to see that he never got out. The only time Curtis can get to me now was in my dreams.